It's 2025. G'day and welcome back to Mark My Words, back for another year. I had put a lot of thought into how I wanted to start this year, and I wanted to get back to the reason why I do this, why I've done 250 episodes, why I've done this for the last 5 years. It's because of a mate of mine called Daniel, who he passed away. He died by suicide. And so much of his story is interlinked with the whys of what I do that I wanted to share his story this year. Now, I've done it already on the radio show. We do mental illness education in you, which is on Wednesdays at 11 o'clock on 2XX Canberra. And what I do on that radio show is I always get somebody in and I get them to tell their story, because that's their job. Not my job to tell their story. It's their story. They can tell it. And part of doing that is that I always ask the question who they are. Now, of course, Daniel has passed away. Daniel is dead. So I had to tell his story as it relates to me. Now, I can't tell the story of why he did, what he was thinking. Did he have a mental illness? I don't know any of that stuff. That's not in my purview. I'll never be able to know. But I do know that his was a life that was tragically cut short. I can't imagine what he was going through in those last few minutes. I mean, that's a stupid expression. I can't imagine. I've been there. I'm a suicide survivor myself. But I want you to know that Daniel is the heart of a lot of the stuff that I do around mental illness, why I do this, why I talk about it in schools and workplaces. So that's what I'm going to share with you this week. It's from the radio show, so there won't be any video for you YouTubers, but I'll put a nice graphic up there. Now, just to let you know, you can buy some shirts, markmyshirts.com. I've got some PTSD shirts. I've got some Mark My Words shirts. The website, markmywords.com. The book, amazon.com. It's Shattered the Book. And, of course, you can continue to listen to the podcast. Like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate you. Here it is, 2025, my first episode. And this one is for Daniel. Welcome to Mark My Words. Mark My Words is the story of my journey from a place where I was shattered to where I could live again. Warning. Mental illness education and you is the lived experience stories of people affected by mental illness and may contain descriptions of depression, suicide, addiction, and or abuse. G'day and welcome once again to me and you, Mental Illness Education and You. I'm Mark. You've got me for the next half hour or so. My first guest, we're going to do something a little bit different today. So I'm going to ask the question that I ask every week. Now, normally I won't give a description of my guest because that's their job. This week's guest, however, is somebody that's no longer with us. And I'm going to try and tell a part of his story that it's really from my perspective. So first off, I want to introduce my friend Daniel. Daniel died a few years ago at this time of year. Daniel chose to take his own life. Now, who was Daniel to me? Daniel was a guy that I knew initially who was just on my periphery. At the time, I was doing some work for a community radio station, and part of my job was to bring in new volunteers to work at the station. This guy, Daniel, showed up at every event that there was. He always stayed in the background. He always helped. He always put stuff away. He always helped us pack down from an outside broadcast. But just by looking at him, you could tell that he wanted to be more involved. And I mentioned to him a couple of times coming on air, and he did one of those things, you know how people, they really want to do something, but they kind of don't feel like they should. And I said, do you want to come on air? And he did one of those, no, I better not. Anyways, he was a shy kind of guy, so I couldn't just come outright and go, come on, mate, let's go get you on air, let's do this. So it just so happened that we were at an event, and I'd been on air for about 5 or 6 hours that day, and I was exhausted. So I went over to Dan and I said, mate, could you do me a favour? Could you come on air with me? Because being an extrovert, I always deal better when there's somebody else across the way from me. I'm always my better self. And he said yes, clearly as a favour to me. So he came on air and he was magnificent. He did a great job, had a really good voice, not the best voice, but neither do I have the best voice for radio. It's not about that. It's about the personality. It's about what he could bring. And he brought himself. He was authentic and he was real. And he and I just got on like a house on fire. And I started to learn things about Dan. When we finished the broadcast, I said, mate, I really want you to come back on air with me. I think you can do this. And he said, yeah, he'd love to. So in learning about Daniel, I learned a few things about him. I learned that he was brave. He was courageous in a way that I could never understand. Now, for some reason, one year, he decided that he wanted to go and experience Passover in Israel. Now, I'm not sure why he wanted to do that. I don't understand. But for him, it was something that he wanted to do. So I said, oh, great. So who did you go and stay with over there? Who were your friends? He said, oh, I didn't know anyone. Basically, he jumped on a plane to Israel, landed, and then just started asking around. Hey, I'm a stranger and I'm looking to be involved in Passover. This is courage on an order that I couldn't even imagine. It was courage that it blew my mind. It staggered me when he was telling me this story. And then he told me about this extraordinary series of events, people inviting them into their homes, people including him, taking him to events, feeding him, giving him a place to stay. He'd taken thousands of dollars with him and he didn't have to spend a cent the whole time he was there, just the generosity of strangers. Now, I can't even imagine the courage that it would take to do this. He was just that kind of guy. So I brought him on board. I started to mentor him. I started to teach him, started to show him the ropes of what it meant to be on radio. And eventually he ended up with his own show. He was just that good. He was that motivated. Now, while he was doing this, he was also doing things like a small radio station in Africa. I don't know how he heard about them. Just a community station, needed somebody to help them set up all their equipment. Now, him being a tech head, he just went to Africa and spent a month or a couple of weeks building a radio station for this community in the middle of Africa somewhere. This was who Daniel was. Now, I knew Daniel for a couple of years, and then he came to me one day and said, mate, I'm moving. I'm moving a long way across the country. I've met somebody, and this is the way my life is going to go. And I said, okay, mate, well, you know, God bless. Whatever you need, you're still my friend. I love you. Let's just keep in touch. And we did. Now, Daniel was living in this city that was far away. And I don't know what his circumstance was. I was with my family. We were on a cruise. We were having an amazing time as a family. My kids, my wife, my mother-in-law, we were having a great time. We were laughing. We were joking. It was really a wonderful time. And then one day at the end of the day, I came back to my room, my cabin, And I picked up my phone, and it was a message from another friend of mine, and it said, Mark, you need to know that Daniel took his life today. I could not believe it. My mind just wouldn't accept. I was like, clearly there's been a mistake. So I called this guy straight away. I'm not sure how I did it exactly, but I got in touch with him and I said, what's going on? And he said, yeah, mate, I can confirm. Our mate Daniel, he took his own life. We don't know what he was going through. We don't know what his situation was. We don't know the lengths that his desperation took him. Now, at this point, it's fair to say, and it's probably something that needs to be said, I'm a person that's been affected by suicide. I'm a suicide survivor myself. I once tried very, very hard to end my life. One of my children, and this is intensely personal, attempted to take their own life. And my friend Daniel, he actually succeeded. Whether success is the word that you should use in this instance. The difference with my friend Daniel, the difference is me, the person that's being left behind, is Daniel could never know that his pain was not going to stop once he left. His pain has continued. It lives with me each and every time Christmas comes around. Each and every time I stand in front of a group of people to talk about suicide prevention, Daniel is on my mind. Now, Daniel was better than me. Yeah, I was his mentor. Yeah, I was his leader, his manager, but he was braver than me. He was smarter than me. He was kinder than me. So I'm sitting on a boat. I've just had this horrible news confirmed to me. And then the question started going through my head. Why didn't he reach out to me? Why didn't he call me? Doesn't he know that I would have done anything for him? I would have got off the boat at the next country, found a flight and flown home, and then flown all the way up to where he was if I knew that he was contemplating such a drastic action. Didn't he know that I would have done anything in the world to keep him? Why did he do it? Well, as a suicide survivor, I can understand very, very well why he did it. But then the questions turned, and they continue to turn. The question was, when was the last time I spoke to him? Yeah, he'd moved to a different town, but whenever he came back to Canberra, we always got together. When was the last time I spoke to him? And then the question that has gripped me, it kept me awake at night for years. When was the last time I thought about him? The guilt and pain that I have over his death have taken me years to work through. Now, let's be clear. Daniel made a series of decisions that ultimately ended in his death. When I attempted my suicide attempt, I know that it was a series of decisions on my part. Yeah, some of the consequences were out of my control. Some of the things that happened to me were out of my control. But up until that final moment, the decisions, the choices that I made were mine. For those of us that are left behind after somebody has chosen to end their life, these questions, this pain, this anger, this absolute lack of power. I went to a funeral a couple of years ago now, actually. It was for a young man that took his life. And it was probably the worst funeral I've ever been to in my life. And it was quite simply because nobody mentioned the reason why the young man had died. They were just talking about the hopelessness of it, the helplessness of it. And I was confused. And I actually asked somebody, I said, how did he actually die? And they said, unfortunately, it was suicide. But nobody mentioned it. Nobody talked about the pain that they were feeling. Because in my mind, everybody just felt so guilty. Why am I bringing this up? Why are we talking about this, particularly on just a regular Canberra day? You've listened to the radio today to be entertained, not to hear stories like this. The fact of the matter is that every single day, up to 9 Australians choose to end their lives. That's 9 people. That might not seem like much, but when you compare it to the road toll, when you compare it to the drowning toll, it is significantly higher. And let's not pretend that suicide doesn't affect our community, because for each and every one of those 9 people each day in Australia, they are leaving tens and hundreds of people in absolute grief. Why is it important for us to talk about this? It's important because the person that's contemplating ending their life isn't capable of being able to understand the pain that their death is going to leave behind. Now, I can tell you about Daniel. I can describe him all day long, and I can tell you that wherever he is now, whether you believe in an afterlife or not, Dan was so kind, so giving, that he would be devastated to know that we're still 5, 6, 7 years after his death. It's not that long. We're still talking about the pain that it left behind. I know that he would be devastated to know that he had hurt the people around him so much. Guilt, blame, these are not things that we should use when we talk about suicide. What we need to do when we talk about suicide is to let people know that the consequences for everyone are real. Now, a person with a suicidal mindset, suffering suicidal ideation, is not able to make that rational kind of thought process work in their head. They're lost in hopelessness. They're lost in helplessness. They're lost in depression. They're lost in fear. They aren't in their right mind. They're somebody that is in pain, and their pain is all that they can see. There was a study by a gentleman who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Now, over the years, a couple of thousand people have ended their lives by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. 19 people have survived. This gentleman went to everybody that was left alive. There was one person who jumped once and survived. She then jumped another time and didn't survive. So there were 18 people alive that had all attempted to take their lives that way. He went to each and every one, and he said he had an experience that as soon as his hand left the railing, he realized he'd made a mistake. Each and every one of those 18 people said exactly the same thing. Once the decision had been made and once there was no way to take it back, they regretted what they'd done. My friend Daniel has been gone for a number of years now, but he inspires me to talk about this stuff. I've been sharing the story of my friend Daniel. Unfortunately, Daniel took his own life a few years ago now. Why do I still talk about Dan to this day? The thing about it is that I have lived with mental illness, PTSD, severe depression, anxiety, clinical, all that sort of stuff, complex PTSD, for a number of years now. The thing about what Daniel was going through is I had been through similar things myself. I don't know if I ever spoke to him before that time, before he passed, about my own experience, because I'd never spoken about it before. I'd mentioned it to a few people, and now it's something that I am so used to mentioning, I just assume that it's a conversation I've had with all of my friends. See, a few years ago, I was starting to get to a place in my mental health journey where I was finding that I was able to be of help to other people. I was finding that my experience, my pain, wasn't just wasted time. It was something that I could use, the lost time, the lost opportunities, the anguish, the time I'd spent in psych wards, the time I lived with suicidal ideation, was something that I could actually have a use for. I was able to turn my pain into purpose. And I was very, very fortunate enough to find an organisation called MEACT, Mental Illness Education ACT, whose job, whose purview is to go out into the community and tell the lived experience stories of people living with mental illness, to spread resilience, to destigmatize mental illness, and to give people hope. I joined this organisation 5 years ago now. I've now told my story 250 times at least, or I've been involved in 250 sessions where we've been delivering education about what it's like to live with mental illness and the hope and resilience that can come from it. My story is that mental illness is not the end of my story. Yes, I live with this complex diagnosis. Yes, I live with these symptoms with me every day. Yes, I have to take medication every day to keep my equilibrium. I need to do a number of things to keep myself functioning and level. But it's not the end of my story. It was a bump in the road. Now, my bump in the road was Mount Everest, yeah, to be sure. But it was still a bump in the road. It was not the end of my story. I don't know if I ever got to share this story with my friend Daniel. Because one of the biggest things, one of the biggest aspects of guilt that I have is that I knew exactly what he was going through. Not completely entirely with his situation per se, but I'd been to those dark depths. Since I've been telling my story, and I've been sharing it in schools, in workplaces, at the police academy, in many, many different places, my story is altered and changed. And I've learned that my pain does have purpose, that my pain isn't just wasted. It's something that I can use to help, hopefully, to inspire other people. I've made it my mission in life that no person in my sphere of influence will ever be left so alone like my friend Daniel was, that they would get to a point where they think that suicide is a good option. Daniel was a massive part of why I started to tell my story. And in the beginning, I used to tell my story imagining that I was telling him. How would I tell him what I'd been through in a way that would let him know that I understand? Let him know that he is not alone. I'm going to continue telling my story this year. I'm going to be in schools. I'm going to be in workplaces. And I can tell you this. I'm going to carry the memory of Daniel. I'm going to carry Daniel with me into every single one of those sessions. Now, I might not mention him by name, and in fact, most of the time I won't. But his legacy, his life, the light that he's shown is something that I want to share. Not the tragedy of his loss, but the fact that he was a man that was changing the world in ways that I never could. And I wish that I had have been able to tell him that. And my mission in life is to tell everybody who was in with the sound of my voice that life is worth living, that there is hope in the darkness. I went to a session a couple of years ago, and it was with a young girl. She was maybe 18 or 19. And I have to be honest with you, she began telling her story, and all I saw was somebody that was objectively pretty, and I thought, there is nothing I'm going to be able to learn from this attractive young person because they haven't been through what I've been through. Well, she shocked me. She said something which capsized everything I knew about mental illness. And this was from a young girl. I'm 50-something years old. She was 18, and she's telling this story, and she said what she has learned is to be patient. And I want to leave this with you today. She shared with me that she has learned that whatever she is going through, however bad it seems, if she waits, if she be patient, if she doesn't make a bad decision, it will pass. Whatever Daniel was feeling on his last day, what I was feeling on the day that I made my attempt, if I had have been patient and waited, things would have been better. What I would ask you today is, if you're struggling with suicidal ideation, negative thoughts, self-harm, please be patient. Please reach out. There are people like me that would do anything for you, like I would have done for my friend Daniel. I want to thank you all for listening today. You can check us out on the 2XX website. Check out our other episodes. Have a great week. I've been Mark. This has been me and you. Bye for now. Have affected you in any way, remember, the most courageous thing to do is to reach out for help. The great people at Lifeline are available anytime on 13 11 14. Thank you for listening to Mark My Words. I'd like to thank my producer, Meredith Brosnan, and also Torian, Kevin, and Lorraine. And I can't forget the band Adelaide, who allows us to use their song as our theme.